Good morning, Sandy.
Morning, Sam. Hi, I'm Sandy Hounsell from Soulful Love Relationships, and today we're talking about navigating love and the ins and outs of relationships.
Lovely. And what we usually do is cover a few questions that people have asked about healthy love relationships, and that's what we're sort of going to do this morning.
Yep.
I'm going to ask, somebody keeps asking, I keep being attracted to the wrong people and I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
I always used to think that the law of attraction was so strong that we might attract the wrong person, but I've come to understand I don't feel it's actually that we do really attract the wrong person. I think we accept them. Naturally, we're attracted to people and people are attracted to us and we get into that relationship. But I feel it's a bit of a furphy to think, oh, well, I'm attracted to them, but when things start to go wrong, I think we just start to learn to accept their behaviors. And I think we do that. Well, not, I don't think, I know we do because I went through it myself with my first husband. I feel we just accept their behaviors because we've got self-sabotaging habits, or we've got beliefs or fears of our own. Like my first husband, I didn't realize that he was a bit of a drinker. And I kept thinking it was my fault, that I should try and fix things and help him get through the issues that he was going through. And I just kept accepting bad behavior. And that was because of my own need for love and my own sense of self-worth. And I spent many years in my teens just really, really deeply, deeply lonely. And I felt like a little bit of a limpet, and I would just sort of find myself attaching myself to people in the hope that they would like me, or I would make some friends out of them, or with guys. And it got me into a few situations that I didn't like. But I mean, I know I'm going off track a little bit, but because of that, and I took all of that with me into this relationship, and I hadn't long lost my younger brother, and I was still suffering from that. I went into that relationship. I mean, I was very deeply attracted to him at the beginning, but it was my own lack of sense of worth, my own sense of loneliness, and my own need to feel loved and to feel secure, that I just kept accepting, months and months and of bad
It's funny
behavior.
how you should say that, because that my first boyfriend, we haven't spoken about this before, but
no, this is going to be good.
He was exactly the same. I mean, very attractive, and that's what you find, and entertaining and funny, but then a drinker, and would just totally say, forget that you were going to do things, or but I kept accepting that, like you say, for months and months, because I felt that was part of our love, and until you find out that other people don't behave that way all the time.
I put up with it for 4 years. I mean, we parted, good friends, but we just weren't meant for one another. Yeah, we did fall in love, but it wasn't that love that was founded on love of self. He had needs, I had needs. His needs were greater than mine regarding the alcohol. But, he had a lot of issues growing up, so that's what affected him quite badly. And my deep sense of loneliness, it was just so strong at times, it was crazy. But that made me put up with lots of bad behavior, and money being wasted, and being let down, and things not happening that we'd planned, and it just got ridiculous. So so I don't feel that it's the law of attraction is there to start with, but it's up to us. I mean, we just don't understand that we're putting up with that bad behavior, because we may have seen it in our parents too. I mean, I didn't see that kind of behavior with my parents, but you see other things where the mum might be quite submissive, the man might be quite dominant or controlling, or you might feel that you don't fit in or you don't belong. And there's all sorts of things that go on in family households and environments that are all part of who we believe ourselves to be. So when we get into relationships, those things surface. And that's the beauty of a relationship, that is to help one another go through that, grow, and to leave all of that baggage behind. But we're not taught that, we don't see that, so we'll often just put up with really bad behavior.
So it's not necessarily that you're attracting so the lady that asked the question sort of about why do I keep attracting you know, the same people. It's sort of, you find it's like finding a need in them, in the people. So it's not necessarily your fault, it's not your fault, but you kind of, you accept the behavior because you're looking for love. Is that?
Yeah, and I also feel that there's probably a little bit of a non-truth to, or a myth in that, you know, that because we're attracted to them, it's got to be right. This law of attraction, I think it's got a little bit skewed. When we're attracted to someone, we can see in them an answer to a need that we have in ourselves, but we don't understand that on a conscious level. So you can still be very attracted to someone, or fall in love with someone, and that seems to override. And I think that's where that statement, love is blind, comes from, because you don't stop to think of all of those things. You're just so enjoying each other's company to start with. But it's when you sort of fall into that relationship, then the things that you haven't seen in yourself will surface, because your partner will trigger those things, and vice versa. So and I've worked with a lot of ladies that keep saying to me, like, there must be something really wrong with me, so I keep attracting this and I keep attracting that. I said, no, what's happening is really why it keeps happening is because your soul is saying to you, there's these issues that you need to heal in yourself. This is why you keep seeing that. I mean, I say we see it on an unconscious need level as opposed to a conscious level, and that's why we attract that person, because that person is going to trigger responses in us, to highlight in us that we've still got these parts of us that need healing. But we don't. We look at it and think, oh God, I failed again, I failed again, I failed again. And it's not that. It's because we're not taught to look at ourselves. We're not taught to delve within ourselves to find the answers to our problems. We keep looking for someone else, because from a very young age, and it's very traumatic for some kids, but that lovely bubble of imagination that we live in, that blissful place, we can suddenly be thrown out of that through a traumatic event, or a big bust up with our parents, or parents fight, or things like that. And you naturally then start to defend yourself. So we start to look outside of ourselves. Our attention is drawn outside of ourselves, because we're waiting for this incoming issue, we're waiting for this trauma, we're waiting for this, we're waiting for that. So we're on guard all the time. So we've immediately turned our attention away from ourselves, and we're looking outward all the time. So when we get this thing that I keep attracting this wrong person, is because we're still looking outward for the solution, and we're not looking inward for the answer. So
you've got to navigate, you've got to like look at yourself, well, not look at yourself, but kind of heal yourself as well, and look at your behaviors.
That's number one.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's the catalyst for having a healthy, loving relationship, is to delve within ourselves. And of course, if we've got a lot of baggage, for a collective word, and a lot of trauma there, and hurt, then we're not going to go there.
No.
Our own defense system, which is teaching us to look outside ourselves and find the answer outside of ourselves, isn't going to allow us to go down. We'll go down to a certain level, then we won't be able to go any deeper. But the answer lies within ourselves. It's about taking total responsibility for what we feel, regardless of what happened to us as children, owning that, and then delving within ourselves. It's always about looking within ourselves, not looking outside.
Yeah. So that, I think that's a great answer to that question.
So.
Well, I think it's very helpful, because even just discussing, you know, like sort of going back to when my first boyfriend that you mentioned, you know, that your first sort of love, and I allowed that. I don't think I'd really looked. Definitely hadn't looked at myself, and like, you know, we've spoken before about my parents' divorce, and really just wanting somebody to love you, but it makes good sense now.
Yeah, you just remind me of something. I must share a little tiny story, which I got the answer that I shouldn't have married this guy on the day of our wedding, but my dad had gone out of his way to, bless him, he's not with us any longer, and hired this really old-fashioned Rolls Royce.
Oh, lovely.
And I was standing there at the altar, and the ring was going on my finger, and I heard myself shout so loudly at me, "Don't do it." I could hear my soul just go, "Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it." And I just froze, because I've got the family sitting there. My dad spent all this money on this wedding. No, I can't upset anybody. I can't rock the boat. I've got to keep quiet and just go with what I've made this decision. But my heart said, walk the other way, leave it, don't go. And it was right.
I bet there's so many people that experience that. I know as women we probably I don't want to say shouldn't say it because that's not what but I bet there are so many just that have gone, I don't want to say gone too far, but gone so far down a path that their soul's telling them no, but they just feel, like, we had a little discussion about me being a people pleaser. That in itself is another form of it, isn't it? Like you're doing something.
Yeah, and I was doing that for many years.
Yeah.
But that's a really good example, which is why I mentioned it, because it just came to mind, of going to the extreme of not listening to ourselves and thinking, oh dear, I mustn't upset anybody, I must keep quiet, and I'm going to upset too many people here and they're all going to be angry with me, and I can't hurt anybody, so you hurt yourself instead. But I mean, it taught me a huge amount.
I bet it did.
Huge.
Yeah. Well, here you are, Sandy. I think it taught you lots and lots. Okay, so the other question we have is, I'm becoming someone I don't know anymore, and obviously it's of a similar theme.
Yeah.
But, is losing yourself or disappearing.
Yeah, I mean, I lost myself completely in that relationship, so I was sort of I turned myself inside out trying to fix everything, but that's probably another story in that particular. That would go on for a little while, but I was thinking of this other lady that I was having a few years ago, Sophie. She grew up in a household where her parents were very successful, especially the father, and the mother was really, she didn't work, but she sort of waited on her husband hand and foot. So she was always there to look good, to look nice at the parties, all the receptions that they went to. And consequently, Sophie spent a lot of time on her own as a child. But the one thing her mother taught her, which she always remembered, which she said was, she always found quite upsetting, was that she needed to do the same as her mum, was marry a wealthy man, and that unless you marry into wealth, you're not really going to feel wealthy about yourself, you're not going to feel worthy, and that the best thing for a woman is to find a wealthy man and just do everything you can to please him, but at least you're going to be safe, you're going to be looked after, you're going to have money, and you're not going to have to worry about anything. So she grew up believing that the only way to obtain any significance for herself, and she grew up quite a lonely child because she spent a lot of time on her own, was to marry a wealthy man. And that's exactly what she did. She believed that. She attracted him to her, which she could have said no to, which just goes back to the conversation we've just had. But her own needs were overridden by the fact that she just believed this to be true, that she wasn't really worthy enough, and that she wouldn't be able to find anybody that would love her because of the way she was conditioned in her childhood, the way she really believed what her mum told her. And of course that was played out every day in her parents' relationship, so she really believed it. And so she met a very successful businessman, and at first it seemed that that's exactly what she wanted. So she would do the same. She would make sure she always looked nice, she always presented herself well. She did what her husband wanted her to do, to entertain his friends and things like that at the do's that they went to. But her whole life was centered around pleasing her husband. I think she was in her mid-40s. I mean, this was some years ago, I think about 45, 46. And I was working with her, and she said she just got to this point where she just started to wake up in the morning feeling like she was dreading the day, whereas before she would look forward to the day because she was going to meet new people, or she'd go out and buy some new clothes, or they might be going on a different trip. But even, after a while, obviously deep down in her heart, that wasn't satisfying her. She could see the emptiness in it, but it took a while for her to accept that on a conscious level. And then she just woke up one morning in a real shock and a bit of a sweat. She said, I just didn't know what was going on. But she said, well, I looked at myself in the mirror and I thought, who the hell are you? And she said it was such a shock that she had this feeling that that's what spurred her to, seek someone out. And that's when she found me to come and get some help. And she just didn't understand who she was. And she understood then that all her life, when she looked back, all the years that she'd been married, that she was just so conditioned to ignoring her own needs that she'd done everything to please her husband. Then she realized, well, I don't really love this man anymore. And then she also realised that he didn't really love her, that their marriage had become one of convenience, that he was having affairs, which she didn't even realise that, because she was so conditioned to please. She didn't even see those telltale signs. And when she started looking at it, and then they started talking about it, then he said, yes, I have been seeing other women. And over a couple of years, they separated. And when the divorce came, she went into another sort of level of shock, because then it was the fear of money and not being able to look after yourself sort of kicked in as well, you know. But all those things we worked on to help her feel good about herself, and that all turned around over a while. But yeah, she just found she just disappeared. She just had this real shock about, who the hell are you? And that really did rock her boat.
Yeah. And I think you just put a video up yesterday about that sort of trying to feel your emotions with other things, you know, like buying things or pretending other things are just to cover up you not feeling like happy or content. And that's what she did, isn't it? In the end, she went through buying things, trying to make herself happy, and realized in the end that's not, you know, this doesn't change what's happening inside, does it?
No. And I think because as we were talking about, money wasn't a problem. So money was always there to go, I'll go to the spa for the day, or I'll go away for a weekend, or I'll go to a retreat, or, you know, buy new clothes. So they're always buying clothes and doing things and holidaying. And she never really stopped to think about all the times her husband wasn't there, or sort of disappeared, or she just thought, oh, well, he's, you know, got another business meeting. Or she was just so wrapped up in that thought, I suppose, where she'd been conditioned so strongly that she just basically obeyed everything that was said to her and just stayed in that little world. As she realised it was a very small world after a while. She wasn't even recognising signs of. It was all about pleasing her husband. And I mean, yeah, obviously she went through periods of resentment and anger about all of that when we were working together. But as I taught her that, you know, that wasn't any of his fault. That was what all the issues were inside herself. She hadn't recognised that. Yeah, and that's what happens if we are people pleasers, because resentment can start to creep in and you don't realise it, and then you can start really resenting the person that you're living with. And then you start to blame them. But that's
really, you've got to sort of help yourself. Yeah, otherwise you've got to look closer to home.
And it's not about them. They've been playing their part by, if we were talking about soul contracts, there's all that sort of going on, but they're playing their part in helping us release our own issues. And that's why I think the real beauty in relationships lies, but we miss all of that. And so so the resentment was building in with her too after a while, but we had to work through that. But I mean, she just didn't recognise it.
It's funny, isn't it?
But I mean, she was strongly conditioned not to recognise anything. Yeah.
And then that comes in from what you've previously said with the 5 hidden barriers to love, where it's not conditioning but genetic, historic. She's got that from her parents, been sort of told, so it's all down the line.
Yes, I mean, when we trace back to her line, the women always seemed to be, her mother very similar, and then the grandmother was similar. Yeah, we trace those back. It had been in that mindset for a long time. So it was very, very ingrained in the cellular memory and in the DNA. And that's why she was blinded to it completely. And then because of the experiences growing up too, spending a lot of time on her own, and seeing that the importance was always geared towards Dad and his work and his business partners and his business meetings, and go to bed because we've got people coming round tonight for dinners and things. So yeah, I mean, that was just her whole life. That's how she saw life.
Amazing.
It is amazing.
Work through with you, which is brilliant.
Yes.
Okay, well, I have one more question for today. This Saturday morning. It's I don't seem to have any boundaries anymore, and I keep saying yes. Now, I liked this one because I can be, at one point, my sister had to say to me, you can use the word no.
Yes, you can. I've been guilty of that one too. It's took me many years to find the word no. And it's very similar to what we've been talking about, but and it comes back, it can be people pleasing too, but and that can then, and you look at that and you think, well, because we feel we don't lack worth or we don't see value in ourselves, and it may well be that that's what we saw in our parents, that one parent was felt more important than the other, and the other one was always doing everything to keep them happy. It always seems to be the men. I don't mean to make it sound this way, but
I know, but
with women.
In my household, it definitely was. I mean, 100%. And my dad might come home late, and my mum would then start cooking. Like, we would have had our dinner at 7, and then she would cook again at 10 when he came in. And even now, I still think, what? Like, but that's keeping him, keeping him happy. It's keeping him happy, isn't it? And sort of doing what she thinks would please him. Definitely.
Yeah, and I think it's also too because my parents, lived through the war, so they're of a different generation entirely, where men were really the head of the household and had the armchair next to the fire and always had the largest meal. So my mum was conditioned to think that way. So it wasn't quite. It was probably quite similar to that when I was growing up, when I was a young kid. Now I remember it. Yeah, but. It depends on how much love we're shown as children and how much we see love being enacted between our parents and how they do love. What's their definition of love? Is it to be submissive? Is it to make someone more important to you? Is it to always say yes to your husband? So that's what you see growing up, because mum's always doing that with dad. But it's also when you the women that I've worked with this issue is that often their fathers were either alcoholics or very, very angry, depressive type personalities. So mum would walk around on eggshells because dad would come home in a temper. You never knew if he was going to come home in a temper and what kind of mood he would be in, and whether it be explosive or and the kids would then run off to the bedroom to keep out of the way. No one ever knew. So, I mean, that's another extreme. But when you're coming up in an environment like that, you don't have any boundaries, because the fear that you feel inside yourself stops you from really physically being able to say the word no, because you're so frightened as trying to protect yourself and deal with all the emotions that are going on at the time, that you don't learn the word no. So again, depending on the environment that you're brought up in and what you see and what is displayed to you as what love is, what message do you get as to this definition? This is the definition of love. And like Sophie, she grew up as a lonely child, and totally different environment. There wasn't any violence there, but there wasn't a lot of love there either. Not a display of affectionate, deep, nurturing, for that kind of love. So she would be looking like, if kids in that environment, you're going to look for friends, you're going to want to feel that you've got to people please or do what other people ask of you, because you want that friendship. You don't want to be lonely. You want that warmth, you want that connection. And depending on how deep that need is, that emptiness that you've got inside yourself, you would learn, you wouldn't necessarily find it easy to say no.
No.
It's only if you start getting treated, or you get fed up with that treatment, or you get fed up with feeling bad about yourself, that you learn to say no.
It takes a while though, doesn't it, Sandy? It's not an easy thing, because even now sometimes I think, oh God, I'm gonna have to say no, and I can feel I don't want to say anxious, but and I just feel like I don't want to let someone down as well. That's I'm gonna have to say no, and so it takes me a minute to think about saying no, and that's all part of it, isn't it? It's that, and then it's easier to say yes, even though in the long run it isn't, because you're gonna go around in a circle.
And there's ways of saying no too. If you feel that bad, there's ways of saying no where you can feel comfortable, make the other person feel comfortable. So that's an art, something to learn. But the other thing that was just popping up in my mind, it was not having boundaries. It can be, I don't want to say like the reverse, but you can be, I've worked with a lot of ladies that have felt that they're the rescuer, that they've got to save somebody, got this need to save, and you can then start doing too many things for people. And this is to do with boundaries. It's not to do so much to do with yours, but it's to do with other people's boundaries, where we would then go and help them out or do things for them, or feel that we've got to do this for them, and we're not respecting their boundaries because we don't have any of our own boundaries. So although we want to help out and do things for them, we might sacrifice something in ourselves, we might put something off. They're very happy with it, but if we constantly do that because we've got this need to feel valued or to feel loved, and they can then start resenting the fact that we're helping them out, or we're always there for them, because it can make them start to feel inadequate. We might start triggering their belief patterns and their fears around, making me feel that I'm not capable of doing this. So it's still to do with boundaries, but in a slightly different way, because we don't have boundaries. We can sometimes see to be stepping into somebody else's life or interfering because no one's taught us how to say no. So we're not saying no to ourselves either, and we're not seeing them as being able to say no to us. So we probably should have a conversation about that one, because
definitely. I think it's all very interesting, really is. But working through those things as well, that means that so working with you can start to sort of, like you said there's some ways of saying no, so you can help people learn about themselves, but then they'll want to naturally, I don't want to say like no to everybody, but naturally and healthily say no and find their own boundaries that is going to make them happy. You work through all of that, don't you?
Yeah, because the important thing with the work that I do is bringing the real person out of themselves, so that they can be in the fullness of self, and they can do all of the things that we're talking about, feel worthy and feel loved of themselves and be able to say no. But it's also learning how to then adapt to that new way of feeling and thinking. And yes, there's a lot of help and teaching in how to then communicate in a very, very different way. And it's not about suddenly realizing that I've been living with this man or this partner for 30 years and getting angry and resentful. It's about doing everything from a perspective of self-love, and then being very self-loving and compassionate towards that person too, that you've learned all of this from, even though it might have been painful, but it's still seeing it, it's still learning to see it from a perspective of self and what this person's given. And if I hadn't been with this person, I wouldn't have learned this about myself. But also, so that there isn't the resentment, there isn't the arguments, there's not the fights that go on when people separate. So it's really teaching people how to see it from a totally self-loving perspective. So it turns into like a win-win for everyone. So if we're going to separate, we can do it in a way that is less painful, and we can part as friends. Yeah, it's not just healing the belief patterns and getting rid of this trauma or that self-sabotaging habit. No, it's about really feeling empowered, and from a self-loving perspective, that is the most important thing, is that it's done all through love. Love of self. And if we love ourselves, then we're naturally going to want to do it in a more loving way with somebody else. Even if we want to say to that person, I really don't like what you do, and I don't want you to do this to me anymore, and I'm not going to allow this to happen. It doesn't have to be a fight or a shout or defensive and aggressive.
Or fight.
And even the most aggressive person, you can actually talk to them in a totally different way from the heart and soul, and they will listen. There won't be the aggression there. There won't be the anger there.
No. That's lovely. I think you've covered everything as well really, really well this morning. Not everything, obviously, not everything, but for the questions, I think they've been really good, because I think like they were similar, but also there's really different angles from them, isn't there? Sort of from within.
And I think when you talk about it, you can sit there and think, my God, this is difficult. I mean, why would I want anything to do with love? But yeah, I mean, we're just going into it in a lot of detail and different things. But yeah, I mean, I don't feel any of us would find it simple and easy to navigate love.
No.
Until we're self-loving, until we're fully accepting and loving of ourselves. And then, yeah, it's it's more of a flow, and it's more easy, and it's more natural.
Natural to know what you do and don't want, and
and then you communicate in a totally different way. Completely different way.
Yeah. Lovely.
And communication is everything about connection, isn't it? So
yes, it is. So we're going to post this up on Facebook, and if anyone has any questions, you've had a few viewers this morning, which is quite nice. So thank you. And what we'll do is, if there are any questions, Sandy can answer them afterwards, can't you?
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
And you take care. Have a lovely weekend.
You
We'll
too.
see you later. Bye.
Bye. Bye.